Recognize Ranking Member of the Full Committee, Representative Graves of Missouri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you and Ranking Republican Graves for having this hearing. And I also want to express my condolences to the families and friends of the accident victims. You know, today's hearing is going to focus on how to safely return the 737 MAX back to surface. And this process, it has to be careful, it has to be deliberative, and all involved have to be absolutely laser focused on safety. I believe everyone at the FAA and at Boeing understand that to do anything less than that is absolutely unacceptable. We owe it to all of those who tragically lost their lives to get this, to get it right. As this process moves forward, input from the stakeholders, both in the United States and around the world, is going to be very important. And today, the subcommittee is going to hear from some of those stakeholders. As many of you know, I'm extremely proud of our aviation system here in the United States, and much of that pride stems from how safe our system has been. And knowing how imperative it is that we maintain this record and reputation for that matter, I want to share some of my thoughts on safely ungrounding the 737 MAX. First, the FAA's process to certify the 737 MAX, to certify the fix on the MAX, it has to be and will be a very intensive process. The FAA is going to conduct technical and operational reviews and assessments, simulator and flight testing. There's going to be evaluations and reevaluations and reevaluations on top of that. And they're also going to share information with and consider the comments and recommendations from the stakeholders that are out there. And ultimately, I anticipate that the FAA is going to issue multiple notices and multiple directives and orders. In addition, the Technical Advisory Board of the TAB, and we'll hear a lot about that, with experts on there from the FAA, from the U.S. Air Force, from NASA, from the VOLPE, the National Transportation Systems Center. They're all going to conduct a parallel and an independent review, and the FAA is going to consider their recommendations in this process. Boeing is going to need to demonstrate compliance with safety regulations and with the FAA directives. U.S. Airlines are also going to have to demonstrate compliance with all FAA directives, and they will need to implement the required training across their fleets. Internationally, each country is going to have to make its own ungrounding decision. And the FAA is going to share information, and they're going to provide assistance as it's requested. And I'm glad that the FAA is working with the international regulators towards finding consensus regarding the certification and return to service the 737 MAX. The second thing is the FAA is working with Boeing, they're working with the airlines, they're working with pilots and international regulators, and they're going to determine what training is going to be required, both prior to the ungrounding and as recurrent training obviously moves forward in this process. And I believe it is critically important that we avoid focusing primarily just on pilot training on the old MCAS system and what occurred in the two MAX accidents, because there is real concern that training to the old system could result in negative training by unintentionally introducing or reinforcing outdated information or inapplicable concepts which could actually decrease safety, and they could actually decrease safety. The third thing is, I think it's vitally important that we allow for the various investigations or reviews to run their full course before we take any legislative action. To act preemptively it's only going to be for optics. And for people to be able to say that we did something, that's what that would only be about, rather than solving what I think is an identifiable problem in our system. Aviation accidents rarely have one contributing factor. Those of us who fly, we know that. There's always a number of investigations, and there are a number of investigations that are looking at the certification of the 737 MAX. And if problems are found, I do believe that they have to be addressed. But in reading the preliminary accident reports, as well as obviously many others with a lot of flying experience, many have raised concerns with the pilot training, with pilot experience, with aircraft maintenance, and definitely with airline operations. And all of these issues have to be investigated and they have to be reviewed. to ignore any possible factor or to jump to any predetermined conclusions about those factors. It creates the risk of future accidents that could have been prevented by full and thorough investigations. And the final thing is we have to avoid politicizing our aviation system. Safety is what the core, it's absolutely at the core of what every pilot, every flight attendant, every air traffic controller, engineer, repairman, manufacturer, every inspector, every operator, and every regulator strives for each and every day. It's the reason why in the last decade here in the United States, there have been nearly 7 billion passengers on 90 million commercial flights with one fatality. That's a heck of a record for the FAA and the aviation community in the United States. It's a heck of a record to be very proud of. And certainly one loss of life is one too many, but that unprecedented safety record is due to the safety culture of the aviation industry, which includes a collaborative and non-punitive approach to certification and safety oversight. And we must uphold that strong safety culture and that reputation. And over the next few months, the FAA and Boeing are going to work hard at ensuring that the safe return of the 737 MAX, that it's safely returned to service, and their progress is obviously going to be very closely monitored, not only by this committee, but by the world, the entire world. But I can say without any hesitation that I believe that the acting administrator of the FAA, that I believe him when he said that the FAA will return the 737 MAX to service in the United States only when it determines, based on the facts and technical data, that it is safe to do so. Only then will it happen. So again, I want to thank you, Chairman, for having this hearing, and I would yield back the balance.